Meitner and Castleberry decided they wanted to pursue their own line of cosmetics. And my father said, well, our cosmetics are the best. And they began to argue amongst themselves. And then they decided, well, if that's the way you feel about it, Renborg, you market your cosmetics, and we'll market our own line of cosmetics, and we'll give distributors a choice. And then we made a huge mistake.
The company decided to cut Meitinger and Castleberry out of distribution of not only cosmetics, but Nutrilite too. The exclusive distributorship contract was canceled.
Meitner and Castleberry obviously got an injunction to stop that from happening, and they ultimately prevailed. But now the tremendous dissension and the loyalty. Some people were loyal to Nutrilite, some were loyal to Meitner and Castleberry.
Top distributors like J. Van Andel and Rich DeVos decided that they had better protect themselves. They had been distributing Nutrilite for 10 years as part of the Jari Corporation, during which time they had developed one of the largest Nutrilite distributorships in the country. Tired of the delays and confusion, they decided to set up their own sales company. They called it American Way, Amway.
And Jay and I said, you know, we like this marketing system. We're going to stay with this. We're going to add a few products of our own and just see where that takes us. And so that's how Amway was formed. We continued with our Nutrilite business. We never interrupted our relationship with Nutrilite. We just put our focus on these new products, soaps and cleaners and all-purpose products of that type.
Not only did Amway borrow from the multi-level marketing methods Carl was using, they perfected them. For instance, Nutrilite had never figured out a way to get rid of distributors once they stopped selling.
You know, once you were a distributor, you were always a distributor. We had 80, 90,000 distributors. Amway, when they looked at this, we have to put some qualifications. In order to be a distributor, you know, you got to sign up each year, you know, as a distributor to get reauthorized. So that helps clean out the deadwood.
Amway also streamlined the profit-sharing plan to make it more beneficial for everyone. The company became a tremendous success, selling a wide variety of products. Nutrilite, on the other hand, was struggling.
Castleberry and Meitner began to fight amongst themselves, and Castleberry retired, and that was the Meitner Corporation, and everybody was fighting with everybody. And finally, negotiations were commenced with Meitner to see if he wanted to sell out. And he was ready to bail at this time. And so in 1963, we acquired Meitner Corporation totally.
Sam Renborg joined Nutrilite a year later. Carl was 77 and was phasing himself out of the day-to-day management of the company. He left that to his wife, his son, and a board of directors.
And we began to get back to basics. And back to basics meant getting out, talking to people, holding sales meetings around the country. And we stopped the downside and began to grow the business again. And by 1969, we were probably back up into the $12, $13 million range, and things were looking pretty good again.
And while Sam focused on the family business, Carl continued to chase other dreams.
I think where most people might kick back, put their feet up and light up a cigar and say, I've made it, he was thinking, what can I do with this wealth? Now I can see the world. I can see these places that I've never been, the Middle East. I can go see the Dead Sea Scrolls. In fact, he actually funded some of the research on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
He also funded a group trying to prevent the deforestation of Northern California. And he spent months attempting to harvest plankton and then concentrate the protein to make a pill to prevent malnutrition. He accomplished it, but it was very expensive, and Carl scrapped it as an unfeasible idea. Carl was also able to take care of one lingering bit of business. He had his limo driver pull up to the boat shed on Balboa Island, where he had fled in the middle of the night.
So I strolled out to the car, and in the back seat sat Carl Renborg, whom we hadn't seen in 15 or 20 years. And he asked me to sit down, and he said, I remember leaving your dad's office shop, and I owed him some money, and I'd like to pay him back with interest.
Ed says, well, you know, we wrote that off 20 years ago, and Carl says, well, I understand you're a yacht broker now. Maybe I can buy a yacht from you. So Carl ended up buying all his yachts from Richardson Yacht Brokerage.
The sea was his great escape, always had been. On the ocean, he was free of business headaches. He was free to ponder. And with the success of Nutrilite, he traveled even more, sharing his love of new experiences with his granddaughter Lisa, sending her gifts from around the world, along with special notes.
You know, I'd buy an old quilt. He bought me a beautiful oil painting. And then the letter that would accompany each gift always told a story of where he was, something about it, or he would write to me in third person and assume a character where he was. One, he is a little mockingbird.
Didn't I tell you who I am? Oh, well, I am a mockingbird, and we are famous because we defend our babies fiercely.
He writes a whole story about the mockingbird to tell me what's happening where they are, so that's a real treasure.
In 1969, the federal government unknowingly verified what Carl had been saying for decades and gave Nutrilite a huge boost.
It was called the White House Conference on Nutrition. It was the first time the American public were told that the American diet wasn't as good as they thought it was, and furthermore that the American diet was at the cause of many of the chronic diseases that were growing almost on an exponential basis. Heart disease, cancer, strokes were on a huge increase. This is often considered to be the birth of the health and fitness movement.
Sam Renborg became Nutrilite's president, but by 1972 it was clear that the Amway sales team was better equipped to push Nutrilite into the global market than anyone else. Amway needed Nutrilite too.
We kept saying, one of these days we ought to have a product of that type in our line. So then it was a question of what were we going to do to get such a product, and Jay and I both agreed that the best thing to do was see if we couldn't make a deal with Nutrilite, because that was the finest product on the market.
Negotiations began, and Carl eventually sold the business to Amway, with Sam Renborg remaining as Nutrilite's president.
The impact on Nutrilite was sudden, it was dramatic. Our business went up fourfold overnight.
And when Amway opened up international markets for Nutrilite, it brought Carl Renborg's dream full circle, since Nutrilite can now be found in China.
Now, this was a guy who really was on to something big. And so it's thrilling to see his dream fulfilled a little bit more these days, as we're able to take it all over the world, which was his vision, that he could bring better health and better nutrition to people everywhere.
Just months after the sale, in January 1973, Carl Renborg died at the age of 86. Today, Nutrilite is selling over $1 billion worth of supplements a year. His idea, often ridiculed, has been validated in overwhelming fashion. The eccentric was actually a visionary. Carl Renborg had chased his dream, and the result was exactly what he had hoped. He built a wildly successful business and gave millions the chance to lead healthier lives. And his dream still lives on at the Carl F. Renborg Agricultural Research Center at Lakeview Farm, where researchers continue to look for the best way to grow foods organically. All of it, from Nutrilite to the research farm, stemmed from Carl Renborg's huge curiosity.
He thought in his mind that God had laid down some natural laws of the universe. And he thought that that was the beckoning of mankind, was to really understand them.
He loved nature. Nature fascinated him. The wonders of the universe. Yeah, that was his passion.
He lived in the same world with the rest of us, but he had ideas that most of us would never even consider.
He was one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. And he was never satisfied with anything.
He used to tell me that, he said, if you have a dream and you're willing to pursue it, that dream will someday come true. You know, he was not a believer of, short-term goals. He was much more of a believer having a long-term goal out there and a vision. And then if you were willing to throw yourself into that thing, it would happen someday.